Lou Perez is a comedian, producer, host of the Lou Perez Podcast, and author of the book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. Free the People has teamed up with Lou to produce a new series, Comedy is Murder, in which one of Lou's characters is arrested for a murder she says she didn't commit. During our interview, the morbid joke is on us, as the smoke from the Canadian wildfires settles in the background. We discuss his writing process, the dynamics of dry humor, and the difference between mocking and making light of a sacred cow. We explore the phenomenon of words being labeled literal violence and its effect on free speech. Lou also misgenders me as a farmer, not a gardener. Discovering the deep need for comic relief, I'm Sienna Mae Heath, and this is Leaving the Left for Liberty. Well, I've been really looking forward to reconnecting with you after we met in New York at our Liberty pub during Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just really moved at how you framed the chaos and the censoriousness of the 2020s as an opportunity. You know, so often people get lost in the negative, like understandably. There's plenty of downsides to what we're seeing in terms of people getting canceled and censored, and but I see that you've really made the most of it, and I feel like you're really coming into a bloom of sorts in your comedy career, which is awesome to see. And so I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the bloom reference from a farmer. So that's very nice to hear.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that too. And I've really been enjoying your Comedy is Murder series here on our channel. It's given me much needed comic relief. And I'd like to start with your point of view on comedy as murder and just the overall phenomenon of words being considered literal violence. Like, what points of view are you seen as being deemed harmful these days?
Oh, wow. Well, I think every day is sort of a new opportunity to find out that a new word or a point of view that was always, benign or harmless is now, somehow responsible for the pain and suffering of so many. So, it's like, it's kind of like a grab bag, what it's going to be the new offensive term. I hope you pardon me. My voice is a little crazy right now, but excuse me. I'm in New Jersey, and apparently we're being impacted heavily by the wildfires from Canada. So that's messing my voice up right now. I've never sounded like this before.
Oh, I understand. We have an apocalyptic filter outside here in Pennsylvania, and I can smell it here in my apartment. It's really eerie.
It's so wild. It's almost, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, create like a dystopian nightmare where, language is censored and now the sun is being blotted out by smoke from the lovely social democracy of Canada just coming in sweeping. That's the invasion that we're seeing right now. I think when it comes to the idea of harm, probably an example you could catch quite a few examples of online have to do with probably pronouns. And I'm a big fan of pronouns. I think they're very important. Without them, you wouldn't have the first person pronoun I or we or they or she, he, and all of that. The idea of referring to people by their full name in all interactions wouldn't be the quickest way to have conversations. It would read like a Russian novel, like a Dostoevsky novel, where it's like Alexei Yolanovich, and all their names. So I am a fan of pronouns. I think they're important. But when it comes to I guess like self-identification, a lot of people are rather offended if you like misgender them, use the wrong pronouns. And I've seen even some people say that it's an act of a violent act to do such a thing. Best case scenario, it's an act of violence, but fortunately nobody is physically injured. You might mentally be injured, but I think that's probably an example I've seen of directly of you not using this specific word or this language that I want you to use will result in harm.
And it's ever changing too, right? Like anyone can identify as anything at any point in time. And so like there's this effect of constantly walking on eggshells. And like one way of describing what you're describing is gender confusion. And it is kind of like the haze that we're seeing outside today, where like nothing is really real. There's no grounding in reality. And it's like from moment to moment, a joke can be funny to an audience, and all of a sudden it can be literal violence. And I know that like you and among other comedians have been looking at what's the sacred cow of our time, and perhaps now it's like along the lines of the gender confusion that we're seeing, which is so what they say is like oppressed, even though all the corporations are rallying behind them and changing all their logos to rainbows. And even that is kind of funny. It's ironic how they can be saying, oh, we're like, this is I think it was the UN declared like a state of emergency for LGBTQ, which is, I mean, it's worthy of a laugh, right? When like, meanwhile, so much of big government, big tech, big corporations are championing this cause.
Yeah, and I take I take warnings like that really seriously. That the last thing that you would want is for any group of people to be targeted or for harassment or or for violence. And that's why I'm very much a proponent of self-defense and the use of weapons. So I'm of the mind of let's arm LGBTQ people. I believe there's a group called Pink Pistols, which is a gun club that kind of caters to gays and lesbians and that community, which I think is super important. But because I think physical violence is such a serious matter, I get offended, if you will, when it's kind of thrown out there, just as a kind of rhetorical device. You see that a lot with genocide. The word genocide. Genocide is a serious matter. So to make claims of genocide without the body count behind it, I think is a terrible thing to do. So it's like, thankfully there isn't an actual genocide happening of these people. But then again, it's like you don't want to see the co-opting of a very specific word that has incredible meaning and history to it.
Well, I mean, I can kind of empathize though, because during the pandemic, I don't know if we share this view, but like I was seeing we were at step 6 or 7 to genocide regarding how people who didn't get vaccinated were treated. So actually, I've been kind of watching this from multiple points of view and seeing, whether they're right or wrong. Like I can kind of approach it with some sensitivity, but then it's like, why is it that some people seem to be worthy of like, not being the butt of the joke, whereas during the pandemic, like the unvaccinated were laughed at, scoffed at, and mocked on late night TV. So like, how would you like say, like, where's the line in the sand for you between laughing at and laughing with, like, real comedy and complete mockery?
Oh, yeah. with the, with the stuff that was happening with the, the unvaccinated, I was really grossed out by the way people were treating, unvaccinated people. Is like very dehumanizing. People talking about, oh, you shouldn't be if you refuse to get vaccinated, and specifically for for COVID, the mRNA, I think that's it, mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson. That if you refuse to get vaccinated and you become sick, you shouldn't be allowed into a hospital. You should be denied medical care, right? It's like, wow, that is an incredibly terrible thing to wish upon somebody. Or the idea that you should just be locked away and allowed to starve. You shouldn't be served. You shouldn't be allowed into any business, and that's where that you shouldn't be able to basically live a normal life. And it's wild how that's not too long ago that was happening. And you would get people who, were openly calling for that stuff online, and, on in bylines with their names and their pictures, and, were proud to be on the side that were, basically treating the unvaccinated like they were less than human and not deserving of anything. And, I'm very happy that the unvaccinated have been vindicated in quite a few, on quite a few metrics. So I don't know if it's something where, I don't know if it's just a people thing on an individual level, or it's something that happens to collectives where it's like they want the permission to hate at least one group of people. Like, who are we allowed to hate now? Great. We're allowed to hate these people and to dehumanize them, and everybody's okay with it. Fantastic. Great. Let now I can unleash just my bitterness, my vitriol, just everything, onto these people. And I don't know if that's something that we were seeing. It's like, okay, well, who's okay to hate now? And you'll often find it in the way that like arguments go, and where if you don't have like a strong argument, then it's like, well, you can attack the person and claim that there's something that they're probably not, so it's like, well, I don't have to even answer you because you're a fascist. I don't have to deal with any of your arguments because you're just MAGA. That's all you are. You're just a MAGA person. And I think in the recent thing where we've been seeing that, it's in what happened in Glendale in Los Angeles with between I don't know if they're calling them Antifa trans rights activists and Armenian and Armenian parents happening outside of like school board meetings, where the Armenians were very offended over what their children are being taught, and came to blows in the streets. And I've seen a bunch of people describe describe Armenians, which is a very, when you talk about minorities, I mean, there are so few Armenians in the world, right? Describing these people as like, oh, they're just, they're MAGA. It's like, really, is that the only reason why a parent might be a little disturbed by, what's going on in their schools? So do you hear that child crying?
No, I don't hear that child crying.
That's one of my children. He's crying right now. Sorry.
Oh. Well, the world is literally burning.
It is.
Yeah. Well, I noticed from one of your interviews that you have an MFA in creative writing.
I do.
Yeah, from writer to writer, I would just love to hear more about your writing process as well. And I can tell that like you kind of have this balance of like class clown and also like really knowing what's going on and taking an interest almost like academically in certain like case studies like you were describing in LA. So how has like your background in creative writing informed your writing in comedy, and what genres have you explored over the years?
Yeah, so I got an MFA in creative writing, fiction, from City College of New York. And while I was going to that program, I was still doing improv and sketch comedy. Um, so it was, what was interesting was like, I'm in this program reading, literary fiction and doing workshops with other students. Like some of them were doing, more memoir stuff. Others are doing like experimental fiction. Um, I'm trying to figure out what I was kind of writing. I was writing short stories. Um, and so I was like working on that stuff while at night performing sketch comedy. So it's like a very different, sort of genre. And the way I looked at it was sort of like, if you have an idea, you want to see like what is the best way to present that idea. There are some ideas that you have them that'll work just like it's like a tweet maybe. And then you have an idea that maybe that tweet has some legs and it could be an actual 5-minute long sketch comedy video. And then you have others that like, oh, well, there's maybe there's an actual story here that, needs to be expressed in what would be, a conventional, short story with, beginning, middle, and end and pretty sentences and that sort of thing. So I was always, trying to figure out which stories I wanted to tell and how I wanted to tell it. And just something like that happened as well as when I was doing sketch comedy, like a few years into it, that's when like YouTube became a thing. And me and my comedy partner, Greg and Lou, we started a YouTube channel. We started putting our stuff out there. And what we found from, our YouTube channel was that we were reaching, thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, right? Which is a much grander audience than we were on like the best of nights performing at the UCB theater, where maybe there's 150 people in the audience, right? So that was really interesting. And then on the other hand, I was writing short stories and sending them out to literary magazines, where sometimes you wouldn't hear back from a literary mag for like 6 months to a year. And most of the time you'd be, your piece would be rejected, right? So you spent all this time writing this story to have it rejected. And then, if by, the grace of God, like it was accepted, maybe they had a circulation of like a few hundred, and maybe make $20 on that story. And out of that circulation of 200, how many people are going to read it? Maybe a dozen people actually read your story. So what I sort of learned is I didn't have any desire to be one of those writers that people don't read, that I get to, be like, oh, well, no one reads me, so I must be very good. I want
Such
people to
an enigma.
yeah.
Yeah.
I want people to read my stuff. And not saying that I, write or I work that I'm trying to pander or cater to someone, but I really like having an audience. And whether that's through sketch comedy, through videos online, whether it's through commentary, whether it's through, live performance, I like having an audience, and I understand how important it is to have an audience. And there's, ultimately a conversation that's happening when you're creating the work and interacting with those who are, willing to take the time to read your stuff. So the comedy being like one of the vulgar arts, I guess, of the people, kind of helped keep me in check when it came to my literary aspirations,
Yeah, that makes sense. One of my writing professors in college told us that once you put a piece out there, it's no longer yours. Right. And I think that's really true in comedy, and it happens in the moment. Like once once you speak that punchline, it really does like kind of belong to the audience, and like the weight is on you, hoping that they will meet that with laughter.
Oh yeah, yeah. And also, you know, with that, there's uh, uh, there's something about the relationship too that you have with the author. So I'm a friend of mine is a novelist, and she's not really online anywhere. She writes. She's an incredible writer. She's, you know, very, very successful, and people read her work and will sometimes try to, you know, reach out to her. And you know, she makes it, she makes it pretty clear that like, uh, you know, the relationship there, you know, between the author and the reader, it's in whatever piece they read, you know, like that's the relationship. Like they don't have a right to have access to her because they read her book or all of her books, you know, that sort of thing. Now I think it's a little different in comedy, or at least comedy nowadays, because like people have so much access to me, you know, maybe too much access to me. And a lot of it's mostly my fault because I put so much of my stuff out there. So I'm always, you know, I'm putting new videos out. I do a podcast. I'm doing live stuff. I stick around and try to, you know, sell books and that sort of thing. I give my, you know, my musings every now and then. So it's sort of the relationship now, I think, with maybe it's not just comedians, maybe artists in general, is that fans and, you know, the audience get a lot more of them than, you know, they would have, I think, you know, traditionally. And I think there's the good of that, in that an artist has, you know, so many more opportunities and ways that they could, you know, build an audience and make a living. But then I think there's, you know, the downside of that too is sort of, you know, just being overexposed, you know, or people thinking that, you know, they know you very well when maybe they don't. In my case, it might actually be that when people see my stuff, especially for the first time, they have no idea who I am outside of just what they just saw. And it could be, they could harbor some bad ideas about who I am, and maybe they're right. I don't know, but that's one of the risks.
Well, one of the things I love about your comedy is that you take on characters, you know, like I feel like you're rarely actually yourself. Like in your skits of group therapy, you're always playing a character, sometimes with a completely different accent. Even in like your misgendering a murderer skit on our channel, it was like I didn't really see that as you. It was like a totally new character, new setting, like almost like just like fell out of the sky kind of story.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I enjoy playing characters. When I was doing improv, I would always be the guy who would put on a different accent, because I thought it was I thought it was fun. I think it's fun to inhabit a different character, and something happens to your brain when you inhabit a character and you just start thinking about this person that doesn't exist. Like you start thinking just like them and moving just like them, and you start putting sentences together that it's not the syntax that you would normally use. It's this character. I have a friend of mine who does a fantastic Donald Trump, and he does entire podcasts doing Donald Trump and just riffing on like a stream of consciousness style, where he's not a fan of Donald Trump by any means. He's a harsh critic, but it's like, man, I almost feel like you're doing something like where your brains are melding together, and you're a lot closer to this Donald Trump than you want to be. You know, be careful, you know, because you might go all the way and just you'll never come back from it. But I think that's one of the, you know, really fun things about you know, performing when I can, and sketch comedy in particular, is that I get to play these, you know, very weird characters that otherwise probably wouldn't exist if I hadn't dreamt them up to a certain degree.
It almost sounds like your friend is channeling Donald Trump, like almost like simultaneously Trump is actually like speaking the very same words with the very same tone.
Yeah, I wonder if like every time he speaks as Donald Trump, like Donald Trump just kind of goes into a catatonic state and is like, kind of shaking because he's sort of being used.
Like what is this witchcraft?
Exactly. He's like, yeah, I mean, my friend's basically like he's got to have like a voodoo doll or something, that's making all this stuff happen.
Yeah. Well, and you're misgendering a murderer. You played the murderer, right?
Allegedly.
Allegedly,
I allegedly played
the female murderer.
Right. The suspect that was picked up. I got to play for the first time. I got to play a woman, so that was nice. And thankfully, in the times that we live in, I didn't have to do any work to look feminine at all. I kept this beard. I kept everything intact. My anatomy stayed intact, and I was able to play a woman, which is, we've come so far. So where this otherwise, cis hetero male before you was able to take the role away from an actress. So
I mean, I really couldn't tell the difference. I only saw a true embodiment of the feminine. But yeah, what was it like? What was it like stepping into the role of a woman, a self-identified woman? And like, tell me more about your writing process. Like, why did you choose to have Misgendering a Murderer as the first in a series of videos on our channel?
So I think it was back in 2022, I read this article in the New York Times about an 83-year-old woman who was just picked up for murdering another woman. So apparently this woman has a history of murdering women. And what was so interesting, appalling about the article was the New York Times went to great lengths not to misgender this woman who, quite frankly, is just a dude. Like it's a dude, a violent dude who murdered women and claimed to be a woman to get into a homeless shelter and all that. Made no attempt to look like a woman whatsoever. And there is the New York Times, doing its best not to misgender him or her. And then also you'd have these lines about making excuses about, so-and-so's relationship with women has always been problematic or whatever. It's like, it was like a real world example of like when people say like, oh, we're just, you don't have to work that hard. It's satire or parody. It's right there in front of you. And then from there, I just started thinking like, oh, what would that interrogation look like? Where, you have this person who comes in and instead of good cop, bad cop, you have ally cop and transphobic cop. And just what would that dynamic look like? And that's what we managed to film.
I actually thought it was clever that the ally cop was just being an ally to get his daughter's support. There was like a whole backstory there that could have been a separate video of like his troubled relationship with his daughter. And all it took was like planting that seed of like, oh, okay, so he's got a lot going on. Yeah.
The actor in that, David Lanson, is just fantastic. And I love the actors that we worked with. I love getting to work with those guys. They're just so good. And a big part of for me, comedy is trying to play it real. Like a lot of comedy is performed like kind of with a wink to the camera, like we know this is BS. But I like just playing it real. Like, what if you're in this world where these guys really believe this? It's like, and just playing it with a straight face, and which I think goes a long way to trick people as well into thinking that you're perhaps more serious than you actually are.
Do Do you think that comedy's purpose in part is to change people's minds?
Um, I don't, I don't know. I mean, I used to think that, okay, comedy could be a way to open the door to a conversation. And I've had experience with that. I used to uh, produce a program called We the Internet TV. And there are a number of, videos that we would have that, would be like, a straight up, comedy sketch. And then in the comment section, it'd be like these really heated, sometimes really long-winded, like, I can't believe you people are spending so much time arguing this. Those conversations. So I would see debate, I would see conversations being had, but ultimately I would need to remind myself, like, it all started with a sketch comedy video. So as far as changing minds, perhaps the opportunity is there, but I think probably what comedy does is it says, like, it's okay to make fun of this, it's okay to joke about this. And if it's okay to joke about something, then it's definitely okay to have a conversation about it, and I think that's where we get back to, like, the idea of these, sacred cows, where I think traditionally comedy has been a way to attack sacred cows and, show the emperor is not wearing clothes. I guess that's another way that I've heard it put.
Well, it's a fine line between attacking the thing and attacking the person who's
Right.
very attached to the thing. And I think when people feel attacked, when they feel mocked, then they go on the defense. They get angry, they get rageful, they rage on, like you were describing in the comments. But then when people kind of relax into it, they experience that comic relief. Like, it's part of the nervous system where, like, your body literally relaxes into it. Then maybe, like, that's kind of a segue into having otherwise what could have been like a really tense conversation, having a really, like, calm and somewhat humored talk about, like, a really tense topic. And, like, that's why, like, I was curious about the line for you between attack and making light of, like, because when people feel attacked, it's like they have a whole nother experience with, especially, like, dry humor, because dry humor, like, sometimes it just comes across like, oh, so you're serious and you're kind of a jerk about it. Like, where is that line for you?
I'm just, I just try to do whatever I think is funny, whatever I think makes me laugh. And I think the MFA student in me, I do like a great line. If I can craft, like, a really great line, like, I feel really good about that. So, part of it is, I guess, like, an artistic exercise, and then also an exercise in self-humor. Like, or I want to humor my, make myself laugh. And then I think another side of it is, like, the danger component, or, like, taking a risk. Like, I don't skydive. I don't ride motorcycles. I don't do that much, really crazy stuff. So the place that I'm able to kind of, like, wild out and go for it is in my comedy. So whether it's on stage or, making videos. And I like, I like when the response from people are like, oh my God, I can't believe he went there. Can't believe he did that. And it's like, yeah, it's fun. That's how I get high.
Yeah, I'm really fond of your jokes about your heritage, actually, and how, like, when you were younger, you used to really lean into your full name, the thick accent, like, to, like, impress girls or whatever, like, and, like, you moved out of that and realized actually your identity is not your ethnicity, your name, and so forth. Your identity is being a comic, being a writer.
Yeah.
And yeah,
No, I
I just love
appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you for thank you for bringing that up. In my book, I talk about that, and that's a big thing. over the years, as I've, gone through so many different, changes in life, from, being a kid to, being a single guy in his 20s to, dating, to being married, to now having kids like that. You go through a whole, I mean, like I said, I've been through like so many lives, and throughout all of it, there's always been humor. There's always been comedy, whether I've been doing it professionally or just messing around with it, like messing around with making my friends laugh. And just speaking as a comedian, I just see the world a little differently. That's the way that I'm going to, approach the world, just through a comedic lens. My wife and I, a few weeks back, we were driving to an event in the city, and there was like bumper to bumper traffic right outside of the bridge. And we made the call where it's like, this isn't going to be worth, going to the city for. Let's just pull off and see if we can get something to eat. So we did that. And we were, planning to do that. And while we were doing that, a friend of mine texted me to let me know that a good friend of ours had died. Our friend was 31 years old, and he passed away from cancer, very, very young. And so here I am in bumper traffic. And one of the things that I said to my wife, I forced a joke, and I said, well, at least he doesn't have to deal with this traffic anymore. And that was, a good, I don't know how many seconds after hearing that he had passed. And he would have appreciated that joke. He liked my comedy, and he liked, goofing around. But it's like, that was there. It was in my head. It's how I deal.
Yeah, it's like it's how you operate. That's like your natural way of being, even in the most morbid of moments.
Yeah. And yeah, when we exited and got some Korean barbecue that had way too much salt in it. And, and it was the whole night was kind of a very weird, moving experience and stuff. There's more to it, but a big part of it was, hey, here's at least one joke.
It's interesting. Something I've been noticing is, not only can humor kind of soften an otherwise like tense moment, it can also de-escalate a situation. Like, have you been experiencing that in the past few years, where like you might be in the presence of someone or an audience that's obviously just in a bad mood, and then something you say, a joke that you crack, kind of clears the air, cuts that tension?
Trying to think, nothing's coming to mind. I have a problem where I'm kind of a serious guy when I'm not, doing comedy. Like I'm kind of quiet. I'm kind of quiet. I sort of get all of my talking out through my work. I'm not like a Robin Williams who's just always on. I've never been, that type of person, or at least if I have blocked that out of my mind, because those people are the worst. Robin Williams was amazing, but I can't imagine just being on all that time. So yeah, nothing's coming to mind about me, like, changing things up or fixing a tense situation with comedy. Not anything in the as far as I could recall in recent memory. But yeah, I sort of like to take the opportunity when I'm not performing to just kind of listen. I kind of like when other people are doing the talking. I have a habit of taking naps Like I'm the guy in the middle of a party. I'll go off to a different room and just take a nap. Like kind of a old man in that respect.
That is not what I expected to hear.
I'm a pretty boring guy. I'm a pretty boring guy when I'm
Uh,
not making people laugh or upset with me
Yeah.
online.
Well, I will say that your group therapy skits, I think, do a really good job of like de-escalating what I consider residual rage. Like post-Trump, like what were they calling it? Like post-traumatic Trump disorder.
Oh, is that?
They
Yeah.
called it
Okay.
something. And when I imagine some people are still suffering from it, but when it was really fresh, you were releasing these skits. People like like they have no sense of purpose. Like there's the late night comedy host who turns out has no talent, has no more material. Like there's the lawyer. I think you played the lawyer, right?
Yeah, in
Yeah.
that it's Trump therapy. That's the series. Yeah, and I play like a Michael Avenatti, just real, like just slimy lawyer. And yeah, that was a lot of fun because I think I did that right at the beginning of 2021, making that. And I felt like with Trump, a lot of awful people gave themselves a pass. Like nobody ever thought like, oh, I'm a shittier person than Trump is, or I'm a more annoying person than Trump is. Like no one looked in the mirror and said, hey, you know what? I can't believe it, but I could see why people would like Trump a lot more than they'd like me. Like nobody could even fathom, that people would like Trump. And yeah, that series was a lot of fun just to call out sort of all these different sort of archetypes of these people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, and just how their whole lives now, it's like, what, yeah, the idea is like, sort of Trump's no longer president. Like, what purpose do you have? Like if you're somebody who built your whole persona on, being blocked by Donald Trump, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do? Late night host where, your punchlines are all having to do with something that Trump did. It must be an awful existence, to be one of those people.
And that character really embodied the activist comedian.
Oh, right.
Yeah, like, and like the whole like speaking truth to power thing, like, and turning the mirror around and realizing like, oh, wow, like what have I become, let alone like what has Trump become. And I find, I mean, we're all human, right? So like we all have that moment where we need to turn the mirror around and say like, am I really speaking truth to power, or am I the one in power?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, am I saying something that, is going to get me in trouble or risk, like, people, it's like, have you said anything that's going to risk, losing friends? Are people going to stop talking to you because, you feel like something needs to be, needs to be said? And yeah, I mean, that's a lot of people have been put in some, tough positions, to have to, make those choices. Like, oh, is this belief I have important enough that I'll risk, losing friends, or even risk just the awkwardness of, the people I work with, and that sort of thing. In my book, I have a chapter. It's called "Letter from a Coward," and it was a guy who I knew, who reached out to me on Facebook and sent me a message just saying, I was going to leave this comment on your post about Bernie Sanders, but I didn't want to risk upsetting the people I work with, And I was thinking like, oh man, what awful, what awful comment did I leave about Bernie Sanders? It wasn't even an awful comment. It was there was an article, I think it was in the San Francisco Chronicle, of a teacher had written about Bernie Sanders during the Biden inauguration. He wore these like really cute mittens, And there was a meme that came of it, which was fantastic. It was like, here's Bernie Sanders. He's in like a thick coat with these mittens. And I thought it was great because you didn't have to be a Democrat, Republican, socialist, or whatever. It was a great meme. It was something we all could enjoy. And there were a number of images of people photoshopping Bernie Sanders into all these, different scenarios. And, this person decided to write an opinion piece on how the way Bernie Sanders was dressed was like white supremacy. It was an example of white supremacy. They weren't calling Bernie a white supremacist because that would be so stupid. But still, somehow, with all the mental gymnastics, what he was symbolizing or portraying was an example of white supremacy. And I had put that out there to mock this person, and this guy was too afraid to comment on it because he might run afoul of the good people that he works with, good people in quotation marks. And I can't imagine being like that. I mean, I've held my tongue like we all have on, some issues, and happy that I have, because, I'm like, ooh, that would have been an ugly way to say it. But oh my goodness, this one was such a layup, such a nothing,
It was a nothing. I mean, that was like the most unifying thing about the inauguration.
Yeah.
Was Bernie and his mittens. And I think I remember that piece. I believe it was in the San Francisco Chronicle,
right, California.
And it had something to do with the mittens themselves, like the person that made them. And I was like, how? Can you just let us have? Can you just let us have these memes? This is all most of us are living for.
Yeah. And I mean, a think piece is really like, how can I take something that you love and ruin it in 800 words or less? Like that's the exercise. It's I call them like B- papers. It's sort of like, oh, I gotta write something up. It's due tomorrow. Let me just write this, this garbage up.
Yeah, I think it's Ryan Long did a skit on working for Vice, where like you just like plug into a formula, like you have like certain words like problematic or like why blah 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 is problematic,
right?
And like it just, but I mean it becomes so easy, like whether you're a comic or you're a writer, it becomes so easy to just like plug things into a formula. And once Trump was gone, I think people just kind of went scattering. Like one of like the last battle cries was that piece about how Bernie Sanders was problematic. But meanwhile, like that was the minority opinion. And still, I think even when people kind of knew that was the minority opinion, they were afraid. Like, well, what if? Yeah. I mean, all it takes is one powerful person to fire you. It doesn't take the majority to come at you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, unlike myself, don't like attention, so it's sort of, I happen to be in a line of work where, attention is pretty good. And most of the attention I get is positive. I'd like to say I either get no attention or mostly positive attention. And then I relish a little bit of the hate that comes my way. Cause it's fun. It's fun to play with. But I think for most people, they're not looking to be famous. They're not looking to be a face or a brand or anything like that. So they just start looking at it like, it's not worth it. Like, I'm gonna maybe not risk losing my job, but risk, having awkward interactions with my coworkers or having somebody file an HR report for, whatever reason. And they're like, somebody else fight this battle. Somebody else fight for Bernie Sanders mittens. Yeah.
Well, fortunately, there were plenty of us on that battlefield. But yeah. Well, one of the really positive responses you got from your new series on our channel was Joe Rogan retweeting your misgendering murder, right?
Yeah. That was really cool. I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan. I've been listening to his podcast since the beginning of it. He's definitely somebody who I have hold in very high esteem and respect a lot. And I noticed I had tweeted out the video, Misgendering a Murderer. And I think the line that I put, I said, he didn't do it, she did. And I started seeing like all these notifications, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? Then I saw that somebody had left a comment, and it went to me and Joe Rogan, and I'm like, no way, what's going on here? So then I went to Joe Rogan's page, and he had retweeted it, which was really cool. I think I actually ran outside and told my wife. That's like I was like a little kid, it's like Joe Rogan just retweeted me. Yeah. So that was fun.
That was before the fires, right? So you weren't like running outside into the smoke.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right now I would have to keep my
you text your wife.
Text her. Hey, Joe, stay low with the cough a little bit, happy coughs. Joe Rogan retweeted it. And I'm hoping more and more people see see that video and see the series. We have a bunch more coming out, and I think they're all really funny, and I think people will enjoy them for sure.
Yeah. And Joe Rogan being a comedian, like he has this way, even like if you're watching and you have no idea he has that background, he just has this way of approaching like the most radical of individuals with, just the most chill atmosphere. Like there's literally like smoke in the room, and they're just like sitting back, and like what otherwise would be like breaking news is just like chilling with Joe. And there's that same vibe in good comedy as well. And I'm curious, like in the realm of like comedians getting together and talking about what's going on, like are you finding that there's like more and more comedians who are kind of peeking their heads out and wanting to in a way join like the more free-loving, freedom of speech comedy circle?
Free-loving? I don't know about the free love.
Freedom-loving.
Freedom-loving, okay. Yeah, a lot of comedians could stay out of the free love movement as far as I'm concerned. I'm fine with that. Well, I think you take someone like Joe Rogan, who is, he's legitimately a curious person. He has just an incredible stamina to be able to sit and have these sometimes 3-4 hour long conversations, really in-depth stuff, and to keep them interesting too. And he also is just into so many different things. It's interesting, the people that come to him, like I'm sure a ton of his listeners might not necessarily follow his stand-up comedy, but they follow the podcast or the work that he does with the UFC. So I think that there's something I think with comedians, there is like a natural curiosity, something or looking at the world and being like, that doesn't make sense. Hold on, let me point out how that doesn't make sense. Let's explore that. Like, why is that kind of silly? So I think comedy is just ripe for those types of people who want to get together and have those conversations. And then also comedy is so a huge part of it is about riffing. And anyone who's ever been either in like the green room of a at a stand-up show, or if you've ever been in a comedy troupe, in a group, like where you're working on material, you're working on sketches or scripts or that sort of thing, and just bullshitting and seeing what works. You gotta try to remove as many barriers as possible, to try things and see what happens. So comedy, I think, to be done well, needs to be, there's a balance between like a forgiving environment in that you are allowed to go and take risks, and then also another part, like sort of unforgiving, in that it's like, if it's not funny, it's not funny, like we're not going to let you get away with it because it's not funny, so like meaning if a joke doesn't land, it's like, okay, you got to go on, you got to find a new joke, so.
Well, yeah, but who decides what's funny? Doesn't that depend on the audience too?
Oh, no, exactly. No, well, that's the thing. I mean, if you're doing material and it consistently isn't getting laughs, like you either have to abandon it or really rework it and make, and get it going. But I think that's different than like, you shouldn't talk about this in the first place. That's very different.
Right. And moving forward in your series, what's an intention that you're setting, and maybe a hope that you have for how it's going to land?
Oh, well, I hope Joe likes it. I'm on a first name basis with Joe Rogan, right? Just off of that retweet. Yeah, I hope Joe likes it. I think I hope that when people see the stuff that we're making, they are they're entertained, and then also say like, oh my God, I had no idea they would come at this from that angle. Like, oh, that's original and entertaining and funny, and I'm happy that I watched.
Yeah,
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, I'm rooting for you. Well, Lou, after the sky's clear, I hope that we can see each other again in the city, or wherever here in the Northeast. It's just such a gift to connect with you ongoing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And earlier I called you a farmer. You're a gardener. I didn't, my apologies. I didn't want to
misidentify me.
Identify.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's the Sovereign Gardener.
Sovereign Gardener.
Yeah. And where can people find you?
They can find me on social media at the Lou Perez. And you can check out my book, That Joke Isn't Funny Anymore. It's available everywhere, and also on Amazon, if you guys want to do that. And I have a website, thelouperez.com.
Awesome. All right. Stay safe out there, Lou.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Bye.